Thanks. Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Audit Committee. My name is Peter Marriott, and I'm the chair of this committee. Members and officers, please raise your hand to indicate that you wish to speak. Please keep yourself on mute when you're not speaking. Please can I also ask that any questions are kept brief and to the point. If the webcast stream fails, then we will also have to adjourn until we are able to reset the connection. Well, that's the intro. Let's move straight on to the agenda. Item number 1, minutes of the last meeting. Are we happy that they accurately reflect the last meeting? Agreed. Agreed, thank you. Item 2, apologies for absence. Kim.
Thank you, Chairman. We have apologies from absence from Councillor Jan Floyd Douglas and from Councillor John Gray.
Thank you. Item 3, disclosure of interest.
None submitted prior to the meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. Question by members of the public.
None submitted prior to the meeting.
Thank you. And question from members.
Again, none submitted prior to the meeting, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, straight on to the main items. Part 1, recommendations to the council, and the first one, item 6, is anti-money laundering policy, and pages 1 to 24 of the agenda pack. Patrick, I think you were going to present this item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. We reviewed the policy. We actually found that there were very few changes required. The most obvious being that the policy made reference to soccer, which is a now defunct organisation and needed replacing with the National Crime Agency throughout. Other than that, we compared it against a number of other anti-money laundering policies from other districts and boroughs and found it to reflect all current legislation.
Yeah, sure. So literally, it is the description within the legislation. The 10 and the 15. There's a slight difference in description of what it applies to. But as far as Waverley is concerned, we apply due diligence to a single transaction over £5,000. So whilst we've replicated the legislation, we actually have a much tighter restriction.
So any other questions? Okay, thank you for that. There is a recommendation that we are asked to note the draft policy and make comments to the executive to consider prior to final approval. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 7, finance regulations on pages 25 to 66. I think it's Rosie here.
Chair, I'll take on behalf of Rosie.
Okay, thank you.
So the financial regs are something that we work to every day in the organisation, and we periodically review them, at least every 2 years. One of the big influences in the financial regulations are the outcomes of internal audit and some of the comment from external auditors. They do their due diligence on our statement of accounts and supporting processes. So this is a sweep up over the last 2 years or so. adjustments that we wish to make, and they're listed in 4.3 of the report itself. So the main update, I'll just read them through if you wish, for benefit of everybody. The main updates relate to the following areas, which are detailed at Annex 1. Explicit that the Deputy 151 has authority to act on behalf of the 151. So effectively, it's writing into statute within Waverley, our constitution, that I can formally act for Graham. It's something that's we didn't realise was never actually enacted in writing, but we've operated that way for millennia, literally. So it was an external, an internal audit recommendation. So we've put that in place, very straightforward. B, stricter control regarding funding arrangements and agreements, and changes to funding agreements being agreed by the Section 151 officer. So I think that's tightening up around SIL agreements. Just changing, just tightening up on the governance process on SIL transactions. Requirement for business cases for capital bids. So that's in support of the capital strategy that was adopted in February, the new capital strategy, and also the investment strategy that sits within that. So we're saying all capital bids should now have a business case behind them. It just really improves the and tidies up the governance around that area. Excuse me. D, stricter controls on contractual disputes being reported to the Section 151. And this really has a bit of an overlap on the contract procedure rules. So it's just reflected in both documents. But that any disputes or well, effectively contractual disputes, as they say, will come to 151 for review before they can be agreed. Reference to IR35 rules and contract procedure procurement rules. So we're just really reinforcing within our own financial regulations that now that is an absolute must. These rules are followed. We're just tightening up. Previously, there was reference to them. Now we're being explicit that IR35 is, if you're employing an agency or a contractor, they have to be formally considered and signed off. F, control on how staff bank detail changes will only be accepted through payroll system. This is just making sure that that we absolutely lock down changes in bank details. So it's an anti-fraud prevention measure. So a member of staff can go into the HR system and they can change their details and sign that off. And there's no intermediary handling those details. And G, clarification of external audit checking registers. So that's around asset registers, client registers. These things have to be kept and they have to be reviewed. And we're saying there's other small clarifications in line with the original document also being included in the draft. So there's just a bit of tidying up that's gone on. So that's the main gist of literally what's gone on with the financial regs that we're putting before you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, members?
Sorry, in terms of substance, I think it's all really good, and thanks for that. I've just got one or two comments, which I just want to know who to send them to. We really don't want to be debating comments here, commas here, but just a little bit of drafting suggestion. Who should I send them to?
You can send them to Rosie.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Hyman, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you. Good evening, Chairman. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, thanks very much. Just checking up on what it says on page 26 at 4.3 regarding the Section 151 officer that Peter mentioned. We haven't actually had written in. Does that mean that we've got two Section 151 officers now? I mean, normally a deputy acts in the absence of the officer who has the responsibility, and the way it's written, it looks as though we've got two Section 151 officers. Either of them can act in the same capacity. I just thought I don't know whether that's unusual. It seems unusual to me because I've never operated that way. You know, obviously a deputy acts in the absence of someone else, but is this regardless of absence or not? On page 26 of the officer report, also paragraph 6.3, it says that there's a bit in green, and I'm just wondering why, saying that greater than 4 working days are required for legal to go through the papers in advance of publication. I just wonder whether that is practical. I know there's always well, quite often staff are hurried in getting the papers out, and legal needing 4 days. I'm not sure why it's in green, and whether we can just have an explanation on that. The other thing, I was concerned that the past couple of budgets that we've had, and I think I mentioned it at the last budget in February, that the capital bids justification for all the capital expenditure proposals in the past used to have a form with them, and hasn't had for the past perhaps two or 3 years. I'm not sure it's just this during this administration. I think it's previously as well that they've been removed. So where on page 34 at 311 it says that capital bids will require a business case form. Is that addressing that? Is that meaning we will get to see them within the budget papers, or simply that is it something else that's being addressed there? There's also a question at paragraph 4.8 on page 46. I'm wondering where what is not available. It's I didn't quite understand that. Perhaps I should reread it. But that's all really just you know, issues at the edges there. But I am surprised that we seem to have two Section 151 officers in effect operating. So if you can clarify that particularly, thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Peter, would you like to? Oh, sorry, Graham.
Well, Chairman, as Waverley's 151 officer, we aren't intending to have two 151 officers. In fact, I don't think we can by law. So I can reassure you, Councillor Hyman, I can see what you're referring to and I understand the question. If I turn members to page 70 of the agenda, which is the glossary, what we've said in here is the Section 151 officer is ultimately responsible for the proper administration of the council's financial affairs, and we've added the words the deputy Section 151 can act on the Section 1. Oh, I'm on page 7, beg your pardon. It's right. Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes, I was looking at my ModGov one. It's page 64 of the agenda. Apologies. So we've added the deputy Section 151 can act on the Section 151 officer's behalf on all aspects of the financial regulations. So a lot of the aspects of these financial regulations are about signing off certain transactions, and what we're saying in here is that Peter Vickers can do that on my behalf. That doesn't make him a Section 151 officer. Chairman, I hope that's clear. Councillor Hyman, your question about business cases and capital projects, they do exist now. In fact, we've strengthened the language. At the moment, they're called capital justification forms. We've strengthened it to say business cases, and we'll be requiring more information. They do exist at the moment. We decided in conjunction with the portfolio holders a couple of years ago, I think, not to put those, I think it ran to about 50, 60 pages behind as an annex in the budget report, but they do exist. And I think as the capital programme runs through scrutiny in the January meeting, if members wanted to see more detail behind any scheme, then members can ask for that and we'll provide that.
Thank you, Graham. Any more questions? Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair. I think Councillor Hyman actually raised 4 issues. Well, I may have just misinterpreted him, so I do apologise if I did. his second one was he asked about the 4 working days for legal to go through. Is this practical?
This part of the finance regulations.
On paragraph 6.3.
Oh, so that's to do with Dan Bainbridge's or his team's sign off of reports, and that is what he requests, that he has four days from receiving a request for sign off to reaching the deadline, to give him some time to read. So yes, that is what we aim for now, but sometimes he gets less time than that, and I think he's looking to strengthen it in the financial regs.
Thank you, Chairman. I was just wondering why it was in italics in green, really, rather than, because I'd thought that there'd always had been a rule like that. I just wasn't sure why it's in my papers on here. I don't know what you've got printed in front of you, but on the web, the officer report has it written in green, which is a very strange thing because we normally don't get things written in green in our papers, and it's in italics. I just wonder whether there was a real purpose for that anomaly or whatever.
Does that cover all your questions, Councillor Hyman?
Well, just about okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. In that case, well, I've got one or two minor questions to raise. I found it a little difficult to see or understand how the key controls related to the text following in the different sections, because there seemed to be a mixture of comment. And I assume the key controls were the reference to the documentation that you need to refer to in those particular activities. And in some cases, there does seem to be a sort of mismatch somehow in how they were written down. Let me just go through one or two of the things that I picked up. On 3.2, page 37, when you say budget process, this is a key control. The budget process is planned and communicated. Now, I was expecting to see there some procedure that you would need to follow, some written procedure. Is that the case? And if so, can that be the reference in that bullet? So whatever there's.
Certainly, Chair, it can be. We absolutely do, as you just described. We just haven't written in here exactly what the process is that we follow.
I mean, the question is, I suppose, is that important to do to list those documents in this section? Because you've gone to the process of writing down the key controls, basically. So it seems to me those controls should be defined.
Certainly, they can be brought into this.
And then on page 41, section 3.28, where you say assess whether or not the proposed supplementary estimate and so on. The question is how. The assessment infers that there is some procedure that you need to adopt and will be adopting. It's 3.28, subset 3 on page 41.
So Chairman, yes, what we probably should have put in here is cross-reference to the template that sits, I think it's right at the back of the document, actually. It's there's a supplementary estimate template, and I think a cross-reference to that is probably what we need to add there. So it is, here we are. It's at Annex 3, page 66. And there's a pro forma there. Probably just need to refer to that. Yeah, Chairman. Yes, we'll tighten that up.
Okay, thank you. Section 3.42 on page 43. The second and third bullet points. I'm not sure whether I'm misreading this. You say the grants received shall be applied in the year the expenditure is incurred. Then the next bullet says any funding received but not applied should be carried forward. Is that consistent?
So, Chairman, that's actually just following accounting regulations that's set out in the SIPFA code.
I think it's just a phrase where you say that the grants will be applied in the year that the expenditure is incurred, implying that the grants will be then spent on that topic.
Yes.
But
so
the following bullet
yeah.
says anything, but if it's not applied, it can be carried forward.
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a bit awkward.
I think what it's referring to is in the second bullet, if we get specific grants or grants towards specific expenditure, then we'll apply it. But we also get general grants as well that aren't necessarily applied. Can leave that with us, Chairman, and we'll ask Rosie to just a little rethink on the wording.
Another minor one in page 48, section 5.1, the fourth bullet point down, you say staffing budget shall not be exceeded. Is that always going to be the case? I mean,
Certainly, Chairman. Within the budget approval, there's no approval to go beyond the budget. Therefore, if an officer is committing the organisation to expenditure beyond that budget, they should be looking for a virement or a supplementary estimate.
Yeah,
but they cannot exceed that budget.
I understand that. I just yeah, okay, but this doesn't preclude that going down that route.
I see what you're saying in a literal sense, saying you can't go beyond that. Maybe it should be followed on with or identify supplementary or environment.
Yeah, okay. Item 6 on page 49. This is where I found the key controls, which are a number of bullet points there, sort of matched what was in the explanation over page, you know. So in fact, I think there are 3 separate lines dealing much the same thing with debt recovery. And if you look at 3 up from the bottom on page 48 about debt recovery, and then you look over to the bottom, 6.11 in the same section. Then the following section, 6.12, debt write-off, says much the same thing again.
Chairman, have you spotted a sort of a duplication?
Well, it's duplication in a sense, because, but it comes back to what I said earlier, really. The key controls to me, all these key controls should have some supporting documentation or procedure or process that you have to follow. And then the comments afterwards are the bit of explanation about those. And I think this is where, to me, it goes a bit wrong. You know, we've got a mixture of both in both sections. We've got things which are covered by documentation, and then a comment which, as explanation, say. So it's whether you want to keep the key, in my view anyway, keep the key controls as the procedural side of things, that this is what you have to follow or do, and it's written down as such. And then the explanation comes in the second section. It's just
understand, yeah, and
yeah.
And again, if the committee wants us to look at the format to make it more sort of easier read and easier flow with more cross-referencing, then we'll take that as an observation, Chairman, and we'll go back and have a chat to Rosie.
Thank you. That was really all. But alongside that, I just wondered, I mean, I assume we do have a document which actually lists all the process of procedures that you refer to. Is there,
Chairman, we have procedure we have a procedure handbook effectively
Yeah.
that lists for various sections of this financial regs that support that in terms of how to do things.
Okay. Is that referenced in this document? I haven't looked specifically for that.
It probably isn't directly referenced to it, but it does exist. I know because Gail's chased me enough times about keeping up to date.
Well, Chairman, I think it's fair to say thank you for your close reading of the document. By the way, that our referencing to other documents can be improved, and we'll look at that. And actually, Peter's sort of reference to Gail is really important, because one of the first things that the internal audit team do is look for procedure notes supporting this. And this is our core set of financial controls articulated in one document, and it's often referred to in internal audits. So we'll do a sort of a squaring up against other documents that exist outside of this. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, I have no other comments, so if no members do as well, then I think we can close this item. There's a recommendation. It's recommended that the committee recommends the update to the financial regulations to the council for adoption. Is that agreed?
Once amended.
Once amended. Okay. Thank you very much then. Move on to item 8, which is review of the strategic risk register on page 67 to 78. Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So the report that supports the risk register sets out the basis that just walks you through the interpretation of the register. And then there are 3 appendices to that. So there's Annex 1, which is the risk appetite statement. Annex 2 is the heat map, showing the risk heat map, which shows the current assessment and the target of where we want those strategic risks to be managed to. And then Annex 3 is the risk appetite mapping. So we look at the risks from the point of view of the risk appetite and say, are we within our approved, agreed impact for each of those particular risks for the key risk domain. So the committee's had the informal session prior to this to have a look at the detail there, and it's for the committee to bring back some of the very good comments now that have been made on the register.
Okay. Then we've got Councillor Hyman is registered to speak, and then we bring Jerry in now.
I'm happy to wait until other members have had a go, Chairman, because there's a few bits and pieces for me to pick on. It would be handy if members had raised the matters themselves. It could save me from addressing them.
Okay, over to the members. Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we've been invited to repeat what we said an hour ago, so I'll repeat the edited highlights or lowlights. In terms of the risk 19, which relates to the HRA, I challenge officers to just go back and take a careful look at the potential division between the 2 aspects of the businesses run by the HRA. We have, on the one hand, the day-to-day operations, housing operations. On the other hand, we have housing delivery, which is around building new properties. And so for me, on the service delivery aspect is very much linked to the housing operations, where we're managing things on a day-to-day basis for the benefit of our tenants and residents. The housing delivery, to me, is potentially more around finance and how many houses can we actually build with the available funds. And there's interdependence. The revenue stream from our new houses supports the operations, but they are 2 fundamentally quite different aspects to the business. So to have them all covered under one risk, I just put the challenge out there. I had it explained earlier that the interdependence made some logic in having them all in one risk, but I just push back and invite officers to maybe just re-examine that and see whether we should be carrying slightly different risks for the operational side compared with the housing development side. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Seaborn. Any other members with comments? Councillor Dixon.
I'm still trying to get my head around this, but one thing that does seem to be missing, and I might be wrong on this, is we don't mention anything about the housing LPP2 and the fact that at the moment, every time, well, we think there's going to be a couple of developers who want to put housing developments in places which are outside of the local plans and of the Waverley plan. And so those are going to have to be taken to court and go to appeal. And there might be a significant number of those. Is that not a risk that we have to account for?
Thank you, Councillor Dixon. Peter, would you like to respond to that question?
Chairman, we can take that away and examine that as a strategic risk and see where we can fit that into the register.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Seaborn.
Thanks for letting me come back. Developing on what my colleague just pointed out very observantly, in terms of risks that crop up from time to time and are probably strategic, we've got virtually nothing in this about how we're going to manage Ukraine or Ukrainian refugees. I guess we have no idea what the scale is, but we could have an influx. It could be potentially difficult. We were confronted with the issue when we had to worry about Syrian families. So we have mitigations, we have an understanding, but there is a risk that we will have to take on with pleasure Ukrainian refugees that in itself can cause issues that need to be managed. And so I think it might, in terms of risks that are not here that we might want to just be thinking about at the moment, I think that might be worth consideration. Thank you.
And it might be worth adding the cost of living, the cost of fuel, electricity, gas, how exposed we are there. I know domestic supplies are meant to be going up 400% or something. How high could our bills go and how will that impact us?
Chairman, can I just make a general observation? So this is the strategic risk register of those major things that could blow us off course from delivering our corporate objectives over time. What's not on here are operational risks. Completely understand Councillor Seaborn says, and right now we have an officer group processing the government guidance, looking at the risks, safeguarding and others around the government's programme on Ukrainian refugees. So so we're weighing that up sort of outside of this process, if you like, but it's, we absolutely note it. I think the point made by Councillor Dixon around the impact of rising costs on our community is absolutely one that we need to bear in mind. And I think we'll take that on board and maybe we'll, because obviously it has an impact on us as well, our own finances, but also our residents. So can we sort of leave that to be recorded and we'll grapple with that, because one of the reasons we bring the risk register into the audit committee is not just for noting, it's for comments and input. So thank you for that, and we will go away and we keep developing it.
With regard to the last issue raised by Councillor Dixon, I would think that the rising costs of inflation and energy costs are an issue for us only strategically if they have an impact on the services which we are committed to deliver and our strategy objectives. I can see that there could be a potential impact if we are called upon to use our resources more to assist our community. But I don't know how we actually capture that within our strategy, objectives, and issues that we need to address.
But Chairman, so it's a fair call to say there's a potential risk there, and Deputy Chair is pointing out. And the best thing is for officers to actually get together and have a look at that and work through all those different angles to understand the impact, not just on our own medium-term financial plan, which is at the end of the risk register, risk 33 or something, but also the more subtle impact it may have on frontline services.
So just building on what Peter just said, so in particular, frontline services that involve working very closely with our community, and so also our benefits, our council tax collection, our rent collection. When economic times are hard, our caseloads go up, and our poorest households struggle more, and they need more support from us and other agencies and our partner organisations, so Citizens Advice and other areas. So we need to have it firmly on our radar, particularly right now, because we know it's happening. So yeah, really good observations around that. Thank you.
Councillor Hyman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, but it seems to me you must have had a pre-meeting briefing. Am I right before this meeting for members only, which might mean that obviously I don't, and members of the public might not know some background or whatever. I've got a little bit of a concern that it doesn't. Well, some residents might be concerned that there are a number of things which have been flashed up as being green, so no problem at all and no risk, the ones which are okay, where from history it might appear that we should have some concern, and we're looking at page 76 on there, 76 to 78, particularly risk number 9, which is air quality, affordable housing under risk 15. Risks the 21 not delivering LPP2, and risk 25 in respect of East Street and delivery, and these are still ongoing issues, of course, and they've all been considered to have no concern. I'm wondering who's decided that, because that's the most likely areas where if we're not tight on things, it might come back to bite us on the backside. Particularly, I think risk 16 is to do with, sorry, I've only got an online copy here, I'm trying to juggle. It says, if homes are unaffordable, risk 16, which appears to completely be contradictory to risk 19, one of those flagged up as red. If we then go back up to well, page 75, all the summaries in the big boxes up on page 73, where it tells us that we're going to maximise the use of the government rent cap policy to maintain rent levels. I know the rise in social housing rents at housing association level has been on the news this evening, and how it's going to impact people in combination with all the other increases in the cost of living. Ours has gone up by the maximum, and we've seem to be back in the habit of increasing rents by the maximum, which of course is completely contradictory to the idea of affordability. If you're doing about as much as you can to become unaffordable if you are maximising the rent increases. And I think this refers to what Councillor Seaborn was mentioned earlier, where we perhaps ought to be in a position where we should have two separate sides of the of housing risk looked at, where one on the delivering services and delivering housing, and then delivering the services, the housing we've got, and the other on new builds, which is more of a government monopoly, or it's a relatively new game for the council, having stopped at the end of the last century. from house building. Now we're not. We're going back to it again. And some concerns also that one way of getting out of it is to produce mixed development, so to go to market housing, which is something which we'd really need to discuss. We've also got elements in here which are about working from home, and I'd like to know whereabouts all these risks have been considered, because whenever I mention them, I'm shot down. I'm not allowed to talk about it. We're told that it was properly discussed a year ago at a meeting where, in fact, you look at the minutes and it wasn't at all. But the main issue here is something which was raised quite rightly, I think, the chairman and others' behest, which I've raised annually, which is and far more often indeed than that. The head of planning came along to the November the 8th meeting of the audit committee and advised that he was going to obtain further information so that we could complete what are in fact ecological risk assessments, appropriate assessments for habitats. So it's within our main risk area of planning and planning legislation. I wondered whether officers have ever considered and assessed the risk level of non-compliance with habitats. We're in a position at the moment where in November, the audit committee, were told that we were going to be producing, that officers were going to get this additional information, bird numbers and evidence of effectiveness of mitigation, and redo the appropriate assessment pro forma. And nothing has happened since, nothing at all. I've 3 or 4 times tried to get this addressed. The bird numbers, last week I had an email back from the head of planning saying, leave that with me. So you were told that he was going to be obtaining the bird numbers back in November, and that Chris French was writing to Natural England. And now, what is it, 5 months or something, 6 months on? I'm being told by the head of planning, oh, I've written to Natural, or I am writing to Natural England again, and or not again, I am writing to Natural England and leave it with me. Well, how can we leave compliance with the law with someone without actually ensuring that we put an embargo, a moratorium on housing until we've got the information we need to abide by the law? And this is a risk of persistent information causing real governance problems, Chairman, and it's been going on for 15 years. As you know, the people over wind judgment ruled effectively that all authorities who had been evading appropriate assessment and mitigation had to change their ways, and we haven't. 4 years on, and others haven't. We need this addressing. Can you tell me, is the audit committee happy that the concerns of which were supposedly addressed in November have simply been ignored, and we've carried on doing what we always were doing, which is not lawful? This is a risk. Where's that risk being assessed? So it's a really significant issue, Chairman. I want to make sure it's addressed properly and not kicked into the long grass as it has been for 15, 16 years.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Let's go back. What was your first comment? Let's deal with them one by one.
Well, the housing issue, I think I mentioned first of all, was the issue of contradictory risk 16 and 19 in respect of affordability. You can't say that I think it's number 16 is okay in terms of affordability if our policy is to become as unaffordable as possible under risk 19, which is our mitigation is unaffordability.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to pick that one up?
Well, I mean, the council in February, Chairman, agreed the rent level for the coming year. I can't really add any more comment about that. I think Councillor Hyman mentioned a couple of general points around the housing revenue account, and so maybe I can sort of just reassure councillors that as agreed by Council in February, we will be undertaking a strategic review of the housing revenue account over the next 6 months, and then subjecting that to scrutiny in the autumn ahead of the budget process. So all of these housing issues, that's the opportunity to feed those in. That's going to be a high-level strategic review. It will cover the housing revenue accounts function of new build versus maintaining and operating the existing stock, and it will cover rent policies too. So I think all of that will be picked up, Chairman, as we implement the council decision to do that review.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Hyman, your second point.
Well, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, well, actually, I had started with the general issue of whether of the green issues, you know, the ones which are both green where everything's okay under air quality and affordable housing, and particularly the contradiction, as I say, in terms of affordability. And that's, you know, if we've got a policy, I fully appreciate the response that Graham's given us, and but it's a matter of, you know, as of today, and you know, unless we change things, we have got a contradiction between risk 16 and risk 19. The two can't go together. You are either going to be maximising affordability, i.e. minimising rents, or you're going to be, and we've got a policy of maximising rents here as mitigation effectively. So there's that issue, but the main issues, the two other issues, which I was concerned about, the working from home, when has the risk to us, I mean, what are they? This is flagged up with on page 73 and 74, Chairman. Number 31 at the bottom of page 73 and number 32 at the top of page 74 are both new ways of working. It's the same in the left-hand column. The second issue is if IT systems are compromised. That's common to whether we're working in an office or working from home, frankly. A lot of it is. You know, if IT is compromised, perhaps it's easier if people are working from home, but I'm not so concerned about that.
Thank you for those. Let's address those two items. Yes, Peter, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll address the matter between risk 16 and risk 19. If you just first of all look at the summary strategic risks and which is Annex 3 and Annex 2, they both got a key on it. The key explains, it says anything in greens is maintain a longer term overview. It doesn't say just ignore them because the risks are green and there's no concern. It just says we take a slightly longer term view of those ones, and we don't have to intensively manage, is effectively the interpretation from a risk perspective. So the difference between risk 16 and risk 19, they are very different risks when you read through it. So if you look at the objective for risk 16, it says ensure all tenants have a safe, warm, high quality, energy efficient and affordable home. And it says the risk is if homes are unsafe, inefficiently heated, poor quality and unaffordable, the consequence of that in the next column on, there would be reduced rental income and depreciating asset value and subsequent reduction in funds for planned reactive works. Failure to comply with regulatory and legislative requirements, anyone living in a substandard accommodation could take legal action against the council, the consequences of that particular risk event materializing. Risk 19 says the objective, strategic objective, ensuring the service is financially robust to support improvement to our homes and the building of new homes. So the objectives actually work together. The risk description says for 19, if income and cost assumptions within the HRA business plan do not hold, and the consequences of that are, this will directly impact the delivery of housing management and maintenance services, including making responsive repairs, capital investment and new homes, homes development, leading to substandard housing conditions, customer dissatisfaction and hard to let properties. I don't understand Councillor Hyman's comment, to be fair, Chairman.
I think it would be easier if the word unaffordable was removed from the end of 16. Because that's where, I mean, all I'm saying is one's talking about, we're talking about affordability and unaffordable from what you've said, that the word unaffordable shouldn't be there in amongst 16, because really it's talking about whether the condition of the housing that we've got. Now, obviously, in reality, I think we're going to rent out every bit of affordable housing that we've got. So the issue of rents and receiving rents from them, provided that the government doesn't stop paying benefits or whatever, isn't a problem in terms of receiving money. This is a matter of principle I'm talking about, where you've got affordability is under number 16 and it's under number 19, and the two are heading in opposite directions. With rent maximising rents is the opposite to being affordable, isn't it? In terms of principle. So that, but let's not, as you say, that will be discussed during the housing review later on in the year, and it's just a matter of, I don't think it's good to have two things which are contradictory in front of us, which are apparently contradictory, but that's all.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Can we move on?
Yes.
Yeah.
The next point, Chairman, was about working from home and where have these risks been considered?
Thank you. Can you take that, Peter?
So, Chairman, I don't really have much comment in that. I think the risk is fairly assessed, and if Councillor Hyman would like to put an alternative view forward, he's welcome to, and we'll hear him.
Chairman, my question was, where have they been assessed? I mean, we did have a briefing back in last August, I think it was, where we were told by the senior management team that this had all been through council and everybody, and it had all been agreed by everybody. I was saying, well, it hadn't, and we were referred back to to the meeting of last March of the Overview and Scrutiny, Value for Money Overview and Scrutiny Committee, as it was then. And if you look at the minutes for that meeting, as it was exactly as I remembered, nothing had been debated at that meeting in terms of working from home, and it's almost a subject which we're not allowed to broach. I know in corporate life this is a big issue, but where are the risks? Have those risks been considered? Are they written down anywhere?
You've made your point, Councillor Hyman. Is there anything you want to add to that, Peter?
Chair, so on appendix annex 2, so we've got risk 31. I think it adequately covers what Councillor Hyman is describing in respect of risk consideration. If he's meaning within the council itself, where within the council has this discussion happened, well, there's been various, as Councillor Hyman points out, there's been various scrutiny committees looking at the where work happens process, and business transformation projects that are underway. Those are the very projects that the risk register is referring to.
I'm sorry, Chairman, we keep getting told that it's been looked at and whatever. If officers would actually refer us to where, so that we can look at it and see, because here we're being told that we've got to learn from it. The audit committee is being assured that we are going to learn from where work happens. It says if the council does not learn from the changes to working practices, so are we learning from them, and where is it written down what we're learning? I can't see. To me, this is something where we've got words but nothing backing it up. Thanks.
I think, Councillor Hyman, we've had a response from the officers. I think if you want to take this further, let's discuss this offline. Let's move on to the last point you made.
Thanks. Well, that was in respect of the head of planning coming to the November 8th audit committee meeting, which I'm sure you well remember. Well, it was about 5 months ago, perhaps. And assuring you that we were going to be sorting out the issue of our inability to conduct ecological risk assessments. I mean, this is about risk assessments, and the most important issue in planning, when you consider, Chairman, that we've got both Weldon Heaths and Thames Basin Heaths that affect planning consents in this area. That we've got I think, judicial review on Lockswood Road, Allfold, which the council is, where the council is challenging the decision of the appeal inspector. That is well within the 15-kilometre visitor catchment area of the Weldon Heath Spa. Officers appear to be, Natural England appear to be absolutely refusing to disclose the bird numbers, which of course is, how do you start off with assessing risk if you're going to try to the endangered bird species if you're not going to consider how many there are left?
Okay.
What's the state there?
Point on it, Councillor Hyman. I must stop you there. Can we have a response?
Well, it's the most important thing, Chairman, isn't it? I mean, it's not something which has, for 15 years, people have been saying, I've got to stop you there.
I think.
Why are we doing this?
Let me finish, please. What you're trying to say is you're questioning the ability of Natural England to provide advice to the council.
Well, no, I'm questioning the when the officers told you back on November the 8th that they were writing to Natural England. Why are they still telling me that they're going to write to Natural England 5 months on? And why are we continuing to grant consents without an appropriate assessment? I don't know whether you saw Western Planning last Wednesday. Officers again stood up and told us that they've got an appropriate assessment, and then admitted half an hour later that we didn't have. This is farcical, and it keeps going on. It can't continue. This is government.
Let's leave it at that point. Officers, anything you would like to add to that?
I'm afraid, Chairman, I can't answer that tonight. I wasn't expecting a that sort of in-depth subject to come up. Haven't got Zach Elwood with me. I'm aware that he has emailed Councillor Hyman and that Councillor Townsend's written to Councillor Hyman, but I'll speak to Zach tomorrow and raise that concern.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know if it's the right subject to bring up, but it is a risk. I wonder if when we have refugees coming from Syria, Ukraine, and also other parts, what recompense for the use of our staff does the government provide, if any?
So Chairman, the government have replicated their scheme broadly, the same scheme that they implemented for Syrian refugees, with a payment to the council. We still haven't had confirmation about how that sits across 2 tiers. Last time it came to Waverley, that was £10,000 per refugee that was housed. And that is for support, running costs, etc. So we employed with that money last time a refugee officer who's still with us. And once we get the further guidance from the government around what we can and can't do, what the expectation is, potentially we'll be broadening his brief. But we don't have enough information at the moment. So there is a payment that comes to the council, and you would have seen, members, I'm sure, a payment that will go to a householder who brings in a Ukrainian refugee. I think it's £350 per month, and then the government information around whether that was taxable or not taxable, whether that impacts on benefits, etc., sort of trickled out, and it isn't all out yet. But there is, the scheme has been very, very well subscribed across the country. So yes, there is a payment to the council, and we're just waiting for further details to flow through on that at the moment.
Right, thank you. The reason I asked it is I know that we have trouble getting new staff anyway, and it isn't always just finance that helps you with staff. And my feeling is that this government is loading local councils with more and more things, and the very least we can hope for is the finance to be able to try and do something. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Any more questions? No, thank you very much. Then, in terms of this item, the recommendation is the Audit Committee, review the details provided in Annex 2 and 3 and provide feedback to the officers, which we've done. So that item is now complete. Thank you. Item 9 is the CPR update. I think Patrick will present this item.
Thank you, Chair. Much like the finance regs, we review the CPRs every couple of years just to make sure they are still fit for purpose and reflect current legislation. We had an audit conducted in would have been December 2020, which had some minor recommendations, and in the time that has elapsed, we've had a few more changes that are required to be made. So we're bringing the CPRs back through the governance process. There are three of the most significant changes, which is the update to the threshold amounts. So we used to state the EU procurement thresholds. As of 1st of January 2022, the thresholds have been revised, so the CPRs are being amended to reflect that. We've also, following the audit recommendation, included a declaration of interest form. This is we didn't have any concern around this beforehand, but we didn't have a mechanism in place for officers to declare any interest in procurements that they might be involved in. And then the third change is we've included 4.12 within the CPRs, which gives officers additional flex to increase spend within low value contracts. That's all the most significant changes. I welcome any questions.
Thank you, Patrick. Any questions? Councillor Tan.
Yeah, this is interesting because there's something like this has come up under the Farnham Infrastructure Project. In the it's interesting what the Farnham Infrastructure Project is. Surrey is trying to improve the infrastructure in Farnham, but they are including in that project a lot of Waverley projects. For instance, they're including cycle paths that Waverley is hoping to include. So I'm wondering how, because this is what the problem we had with one of the cycle paths in the Hale Trail was that Waverley wanted to proceed with it, but it was going to be, you know, one of these, it was going to have 3 quotes or whatever, even though it already been studied and to, you know, under the Surrey project. So is there any way when we've got 2 councils working together, where we've got like several consultants working for Surrey on, say, something developing a cycling or LC whip or something, if a lot of the work has already been done, is there any way in Waverley, if we say, okay, right, we're going to build that cycle path, do we then have to go back and go through all of the work that Surrey has done again? Or is there any way we can say, okay, no, we trust Surrey, we trust what Surrey's done, we're going to take their recommendation and move forward with it?
So there is a number of mechanisms within the CPRs which allow us to accommodate a situation just like that. So ultimately what we want to make sure is that when we're procuring, we're achieving value for money. However, if we're working with another authority who've already been through that exercise, it adds no value to replicate that process. So there are specific exemptions within the CPRs where we are working with other contracting authorities to utilise their procurements.
Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chairman. Absolutely no problem with the substance in here again, but I did note Patrick say the review frequency of this was every couple of years. This has got excellent document control in it, and it says annually, and we had the same with the finance regs as well. It should say what it means. I think I'd personally be quite happy to see this every couple of years, and we don't need it every 5 minutes unless there's a change, but you should do what you say you're going to do.
So, funnily enough, I had this discussion earlier with another officer. We do review it every year. It's just whether or not we find anything within that review that warrants change. So typically the way it's been with the CPRs is we bring them only every couple of years, but we find it important every year to go through it just to ensure that there isn't anything that does require amending.
In which case it might be just useful to put that there to stop the next generation of councillors getting confused by expecting something to have been in front of us last year. I was putting that down to COVID. I'm probably being overly kind. But, thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. Oh, sorry.
Forgive me if I've missed it somewhere in the document, which, as with Councillor Seaborn, it seems to be very comprehensive, so comprehensive that I've missed out any kind of check being made on the lawfulness of the supplier and the supplier's ownership. Is that something which we do? Do we do a check against the directors and governing body of a supplier? And I'm thinking at the back of my mind, of course, is whether there's any relationship topically to a Ukrainian owner. But, you know, is there any criminal checks being made against the supplier? Well, you know what I'm getting at.
Yes, yeah. So our procurement processes are proportionate to the resulting contract values. So in answer to your question, for our low value contracts, no, we don't carry out that level of due diligence. However, for our higher value threshold contracts, we have a far more extensive procurement process. Part of that is doing checks on things like, modern slavery, fraud, corruption, bribery, any criminality. So those checks are done, but only for our higher value contracts.
The section on modern day slavery, but I couldn't see allusions to others as part of the checklist, which I guess, as you point out, higher value contracts are worthy of the investment in the due diligence.
Thank you. I've got some formatting issues on this, but perhaps I can talk to you, Patrick, separately. There's no point going into them now, but just two I just point out. On the contents page, you're missing item 13, that's missing off the contents list on page 85. And a general question, if I can find it. 85. It's the to do with the reverse VAT, there that is. That can't find the right page at the moment, is that what it's called, reverse VAT? Is that the
Yeah, so that's 7.3 reverse charge of
that's
VAT.
right, 7.3, yes. I understood that was for new builds only, is that correct?
I'm not going to pretend to understand VAT or the reverse charge of it. So that was a paragraph that was inserted in conjunction with our finance colleagues. We came up with that wording. I can't expand on it beyond that, I'm afraid.
Yeah, okay, could you check on that? Because I had that from a reliable source. It doesn't apply to extensions or modifications to buildings.
Chairman, we'll check. We are very lucky here, actually, at Waverley. We have somebody who's very, very knowledgeable on VAT. It's just not me. So I can't answer that now, but we will certainly take that back to our colleague who is. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. In that case, I think we can say this item is complete. Recommendation, the audit committee are asked to approve the draft CPRs and make recommendation to the council to approve. Is that agreed? Thank you very much.
Yeah, Chairman, thank you. This is an update on a piece of work that we brought to the committee last year. So CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, is the accountancy body that oversees the financial frameworks for local authorities and the health service. And they've introduced a code about a year and a half ago now that we've been working through. It's a good document. I've got it here. It's a very thick document. And what we did last autumn was just have a discussion with the audit committee around its scope. As the report says, 4.3, the code doesn't prescribe financial management processes that we should adopt, but it sets out a framework that will help us satisfy the principles of good financial management, which is a statutory requirement for us. And as 4.4 says, similarly to what Patrick said, actually, it's about proportionality. We really don't want to create a mini industry and take up a load of resource just to self-assess against an external code. What we do want to do is take a good document that's based on practice across lots of local authorities and adopt and check ourselves against it where we think it will add some value. So what this report does, Chairman, is just gives you an update on where we think we are against that code. And in Annex B, we've set out a sort of a self-assessment And the code comes with, sorry, let me give you a page number. So page 115 onwards. Sorry, that's the actual plan, big bun. It's page, there we go, 119 onwards. And we've assessed ourselves against key questions that come straight from the guidance notes. There's a very comprehensive guidance note pack that supports the value for money code. Sorry, value for money code, for the financial management code. And the officer team have gone through and assessed. And what we're suggesting in the action plan is there are a couple of areas where over the coming months and over the year, we can dive a bit deeper into a couple of those areas using various methods and forums. And we're suggesting that, not for now, but just to seek your agreement to, section, sorry, lost it, section C, so FM standard C and D, we would like to run a session with the audit committee. I'd suggest we do an offline session so that we're not time constrained on a busy agenda and we can really get into the detail. And so C, Financial Management Standard C, is all about assurance, and it's about the leadership team demonstrating actions, behaviours for governance and internal control. And there are a series of questions there. And D is about accountability and whether we, as a council, apply the Sit for Solid's Good Governance Guide, and there are a number of questions there. So what we're proposing in the action plan, Chairman, is to set something up in April or May with the audit committee to run through those key questions, see where members of the committee feel we are. The officer team can support with evidence supporting, and hopefully we can get a little action plan coming out of that. And at the bottom of the action plan, we are suggesting that we do an update report to the audit committee annually in the June meeting, and that will actually help inform our annual governance statement that we will have on the subsequent agenda. So I think it all hangs together. There's some really good stuff in here. We're not out chasing, just chasing accreditation of anything here. We, genuinely are trying to keep this proportionate and take the best bits out that we think are will help us strengthen our arrangements. And that's pretty much all I wanted to say today, Chairman. So you're welcome any comments, and then we'll be back in June with an update.
Thank you, Graham. Any comments? So, Councillor Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I think it's really good, and you've got a lot to go through. So congratulations for taking it on. The only question I'd ask is, or request I'd put forward is, you're using a RAG rating. It's always helpful to actually define what RAG actually means. Is green completely under control, just monitor, or is there a threshold to get into green? Just a little a key somewhere to tell us what we're looking at there, because one member's RAG, one member's G could be someone else's R, unfortunately, particularly if you're colourblind. Thanks.
Chairman, if I may, no, thank you. That's a very good point. And as Peter had with the risk register, yes, we need to just put that key there. And I mean, green is, just to explain, I mean, green is where we feel we are sort of compliant against the questions in the guidance. Amber's where we feel we are in some of those areas, but we need to do a bit more work. And red, clearly is where we feel we fall short, and we didn't find any of those because we are, we could evidence most of the criteria that we found in here, but there are definitely some places where we can strengthen, and we will add that key. Thank you, Councillor Seaborn.
Councillor Davison.
Well, following Councillor Seaborn, he's pretty well answered or addressed some of the questions I was going to ask. What I'd love to hear when we do go through this in more detail subsequently is why officers were reluctant to use green. Just it's not a criticism. It's just what are the rationale why green wasn't there. And like Councillor Seaborn, it's great to see no reds.
Chairman, I mean, I can offer sort of a part of an explanation now, and certainly we'll pick up on it later. And actually, where we've ambered rather than green, it's not because we found any significant weaknesses. It's where there are a couple of the key questions that SIPFA have set out, where we felt that we weren't as strong as we could be, and that there was more work to do. And crucially, where some things we thought might be there but aren't embedded. So we're quite hard on ourselves, actually, I have to say. But maybe we can add some more detail when we go through next time. Yeah, that'd be good. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. I notice you've got a lot of March 22 completion dates in the table. Is that to be met? Are they going to be met?
Chairman, yes. So those timescales were for us to run through a further self-assessment as an officer team, and we did that last week. So actually, we have done that. That doesn't mean to say we've completed our assessment, because we'll keep this under review and we'll keep doing it. And in fact, we've said as an officer team that we're going to revisit this every 6 months. It sounds like an awful lot of work, but actually, it took us about an hour and a half to run through this. We're doing a session with our senior management team tomorrow on a couple of these aspects, and we've taken it to management board too, and then we'll be engaging the executives. So, but we want to keep it proportionate, but it's good stuff, and we want a broad range of views. Thank you.
Yeah. Councillor Hyman, you registered to speak on this item.
Well, yes, thank you, Chairman. It's an overview issue again, I think, but if you turn to page 120, if you don't mind, I think it has been covered briefly in the officer run through. Item D is accountability. The authority applies to SIPFA Solace, delivering good governance in local government framework 2016, which is what we're talking about, I think. And the questions that are raised there are: has the authority sought to apply the principles, behaviour and actions set out in the framework to its own governance arrangements? Does the authority have a place in suitable local code of governance? In place a suitable local code of governance, and does the authority have a robust assurance process to support its AGS? To me, this is about giving residents an assurance that councillors can drill down, and residents themselves can drill down into issues, and any issues which may be significant, and reach agreement, get a resolution. Obviously, you don't necessarily reach agreement on subjective matters or political matters, but we're talking about finances and governance, and so we should be able to reach agreement on the facts and where the evidence lies. I, for a long time, asked that we have a duty of candour embedded within our constitution, within our governance systems. And I've been surprised by the resistance. It's simply a matter of having a right to getting a straight answer to a question, and then being able to ask further questions until you really drill down into the issue itself. I know, as a matter of personal experience, of course, that before being a councillor, and certainly since being a councillor, so that's since 2016, so 6 years, I have constantly, every year and repeatedly, questioned issues in respect of assurance processes within from this committee, and I was on this committee asking the same questions myself a few years ago. And we're still not there. To me, where it says, does the authority have a robust assurance process, unless we are able to drill down into individual issues of risk and of governance, then and we've got to be able to do that, whether it's on camera or whether it's off camera. I've found it very, very difficult to do. We don't have in place a duty of candour or anything, and I just wondered, do the officers here and the committee and yourself, do you support that the right for a straight answer, a duty of candour? Because I think that underpins everything that's here in governance. I appreciate SIPFA code's just about finances, but obviously finances covers the whole gamut of everything that we do, really. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. I'm not prepared to have a general discussion in this field. I know you've raised topics or this topic many times. I'd suggest you put a written statement together that we can work on a specific issue you would like to look in more detail, not just general comments about this area. Is that fair enough?
Duty of candour. Is it? Are we, or can we not have a duty of candour? It's very, very simple. Do residents get an assurance that they can get an answer to a question? Thanks.
I think the officers would say that they do. Any comment, Graham?
Well, Chairman, all I'd say is, firstly, this is, as you'll see from the questions, much wider than finances. It does go into governance, and Councillor Hyman's absolutely right that it does. Just a reminder that this committee has a standing agenda item every meeting, which is emerging governance items. So that's an opportunity to raise there. And also, Councillor Hyman was referring to FM Standard D, and that is one of the two areas that I'm suggesting that we have a session with the Audit Committee on. So I think that let's just discuss some of Councillor Hyman's points and others at that session.
That'd be good. Thank you. Okay. That, I think, completes the discussion on this item. So recommendation is that the Audit Committee note the progress on the Financial Management Code and endorses the action plan set out in the report. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much. Okay, item 11 is accounting policies. Graham?
Yeah, I'll take that. The financial statements, which we do annually, the annual statement of accounts, are compliant with the code, which is SIPFA's interpretation of the International Accounting Standards. Underlying that are assumptions and techniques that this authority adopts in terms of a whole range of issues that have to be considered in compiling those accounts. So it ranges from things like asset recognition, asset valuation, there's income recognition, liabilities, how we assess those, pension fund valuations, accruals for payments, grant accounting, which we touched on earlier. All of those things are what come into what we call accounting policies. It's about a quarter of the document in reality, in terms of reading, so that the reader can understand the background as to how those numbers were derived and the basis of them. So every year before we compile the accounts, Graham, myself and the wider team look at those accounting policies and we consider what's changed in the business, what do we need to do differently, if anything, are they still relevant to Waverley. One of the things we have to consider is consistency from year to year, that we don't change accounting policies to suit our position each year, in terms of making things more favourable, etc., depending what the picture is you want to paint. So the point of having this on the agenda is just to give the committee an update that that review has been done, that there haven't been any new accounting standards issued that we have to comply with this year. There's been the leasing standard which has been knocking around now for beyond 10 years, I think, probably longer than that. And it's been delayed yet another year because it's such a complicated standard to bring into play within the global accounts, never mind local authorities. So it's just to give the committee the update that that review has been done and there are no changes to note to our accounting policies for this next set of statement of accounts.
Thank you, Peter. Any questions on this topic? No. In that case, move on to item 12, annual government statement, consideration of potential governance issues. Are there any issues that members would like to raise on the AGS? Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll throw this in very much in the interests of continuous improvement. I think it's time that maybe a bit more structured governance was introduced around the reporting of the council's operational greenhouse gas emissions. If I understand the reporting history correctly, we used to have a a government requirement to come up with reporting, and that went on to 2015 to 16, I think, with standards. And then I believe that was dropped, and we had 4 years without any reports. And 2019, we declared the climate emergency. And for 20 to 21, we've had a report, which is great. But if you just go through what was produced, there was no document control on it. I went and had a look at it today, and I couldn't work out exactly when it had been issued or by which department. You know, there's a minor area of governance there. The report stated that it used government guidance to come up with the numbers, but it didn't actually provide a reference. So it's not possible for people to go back and backtrack to the methodology that's being used. Simple thing, but I'm sure it's absolutely fine, but you know, the layman can't verify it. Our reports used to contain emissions from our council housing stock. The latest report doesn't. So, you know, it's great that we've got this reintroduction of reporting, but it's going to be a key document for driving things forward. I mean, each year we're going to have to update the carbon neutrality action plan. It's a major document, and that's going to lead to requests for funding, and that's got to fit in with the budgetary cycle. So specifying when that report should come out each year will enable that to actually happen. So I think for good governance, we should have document control, formal referencing of the methodology, or the methodology could be described in the report as an appendix, whatever, but people, no one's going out there and measuring how much CO2 is coming out the back of a car. Clearly we're measuring how much fuel's going in and doing a conversion. We need to know how that's being done, just to be sure that we can trust it. It'd be good to have a formal timescale each year for knowing when the report's coming out, just as we do for our financial reporting. And it'd be good to see the emissions from our council housing stock, because in 2015 to 16, they were 70% of our emissions. So quite important. So I'm absolutely clear that it's ONS's responsibility to worry about the actual performance. But I think Audit Committee probably has a role in making sure that whatever goes in front of ONS comes out at the right time and is something that ONS can be comfortable with. I'm not quite sure how we take this forward. Maybe, well, I'll hand over to Graham. Graham's clearly got an idea.
Well, Chairman, one of the things the Audit Committee can do is ask questions or make observations to the executive. Can I suggest that this is one for the environment portfolio holder? Because I think there were a number of questions in there, Councillor Seaborn, about what and when, and I think that's I don't have the answers, I'm afraid. I mean, and I'm sure the portfolio holder will discuss with the head of service, which is Richard Homewood. But I think it's a good question to pass on from the Audit Committee, if that's okay. Capture that in the minutes.
Thank you. Any other questions? I think Councillor Hyman, you've registered to speak.
Thanks, Chairman. Again, yes, my last one. I thank Councillor Seaborn actually for the points that he's made there, because that is an important issue. But the overriding issue that I see here at the moment, and it's something which is very much alive and ongoing issue, is what appears to be the legal department's reliance upon the advice of applicants and appellants. Particularly, obviously, the problem occurs where that the advice of the party we're fighting, in effect, at appeal, where their advice is misleading. And we found this at Weston last week. We found this at Scotland Lane, where the our officers accepted statements from the consultants for the appellant, which were completely false. And then the inspector went on to say that she conducted an appropriate assessment when she hadn't. And we've got an all-fold appeal going on. We've got others going on. We've got a JR at the moment of Loxwood Road, which I mentioned earlier. And this is a big issue, and I think it's a big issue of government, because the Alfold is within 15 kilometres of the Weldon Heath Spa, which is within the visitor catchment area, and we don't have a strategy which allows us to exclude 50% of the likely impact, 50% of the visitor catchment. We therefore need an appropriate assessment of that. None was conducted. We're going into a judicial review where we're telling telling the court one thing, but in fact, not applying the law ourselves. And we know from legal judgments in 2018 where the law stands. It's perfectly clear in the PPG. And it seems to me quite perverse that we as a council are going in not where we have a very simple win on a judicial review, that we are apparently intending to do the opposite. Obviously, I don't know any details of what's going on in respect of that, and quite likely, as far as I can see, we will be denied the right to judicial review because we're not actually putting in our strongest case, and the legal case that we must, by virtue of Regulation 9(3), apply ourselves in our conduct of our functions. So. We've got a big issue here regarding the Loxwood Road judicial review. Will the audit committee please ensure that they look into what is going on, the case that we're putting forward in Loxwood Road for the judicial review or application for judicial review, and ensure that we are applying the law that protects us and gives our residents and the local ecology extreme levels of protection, good levels of protection, which stand up in court and can be relied upon. Can we please just make sure that we're doing things properly there? Thanks very much.
Thank you, Councillor Hyman. Is there anything we can provide against the comments that Councillor Hyman has just made?
Well, Jen, there's only one I can comment on really, which is that in our submission to the court, we've used a very senior barrister and in planning law, and therefore I would certainly hope all of the legal points have been covered, because that was what we asked them to do. So again, it comes back to sort of taking appropriate legal advice in support of action that we want to take, and so I can't offer any more comments, I'm afraid.
Okay, so you're happy with the approach that we've taken then? Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Perhaps you might like to comment on this, Graham. Is this really an issue of the performance of our legal officers, in which case it's a matter for, I would have thought, the resources ONS, rather than for the audit committee to examine?
Well, Chairman, the performance of our legal officers is for the head of service and the chief executive to concern themselves about. I think if overview and scrutiny committee have concerns about decisions of the executive or policy decisions, they can look at those. But certainly the performance of a particular professional team as the council is a matter for well, in this case, the chief executive, because Robin Taylor is the head of service. So, I mean, I didn't detect in what Councillor Hyman said a criticism of the performance of individual officers or indeed the team. I felt it was a comment around the situation we're in and the action we're taking. So, and I don't have a view to share this evening on that particular point, Chairman. It's, I mean, there's action being taken that's been supported by the executive and being actioned by officers, and as I said, we took appropriate external legal advice. It's a specialist area.
Thank you, Graham. Any other comments or questions? No, thank you. In that case, we will move on to Gail, who's going to take us through the audit charter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is the internal audit charter, which is presented to the audit committee every year. And this is to, again, it's one of those ones, again, where we're always looking at it, see how we can improve it. And you can see where I have included those areas that have been amended or added. As you can see, obviously I've inserted the Joint Chief Executive because obviously that's a change since the previous one. And also in paragraph 9, independence and objectivity, I've been a bit more clear about that, and obviously pointing out to the members that obviously where it refers to the board, that refers to Audit Committee. And as far as those inserts, as you can see, I've highlighted those where I have made changes in yellow to make it clear for members.
Yes, thank you, Gail. So substantially it's the same as previous documents.
Yes,
just with minor changes.
Yes.
Any comments from anybody? No, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Let's move on to the next item then. Again, Gail, item 14, review of progress and the implementation of internal audit actions, page 141 to 160.
As you can see, we have presented to the Audit Committee Annex 1 showing the actions that have either due to be implemented, and obviously those will be shown in having it in green in the RAG rating, and those that are shown as red are overdue. The majority of those have been included in Annex 2 of the report, asking for extensions. And the Audit Committee will be aware that there are one or two of those related to the planning fee income. And also I wanted to point out there is two regarding planning enforcement at the start of the Annex 1. And as you can see, there was work these were delayed due to the fact that we're having to go to ONS committee. So therefore the officer has asked for it to go completely through that process, that he suggested an extension to the 31st of August to enable it to go through the process and for changes to be made as and when required. And so I'm just going down my pages. I'm looking at this one. And for on page 150, the head of service for environment and regulatory has asked for an extension to a few of his, on the first one of that, it was due on the 31st of March, and it's now transpired that will not be completed, and therefore has asked for an extension to the 30th of June because we've had to actually request work to be done by the IT service. So to enable them to complete that work, he's then asked for an extension. I think officers have tried to ensure in Appendix 1 that they have given a justification for the extensions and as to the reason why. And again, there's on page 152 where there is 2 that are allocated to Peter. These are 2 that are actually jointly owned between Peter and the head of planning, which both teams are working on to try and resolve these, but the extension has been requested by the head of planning as a lead on those particular actions. And the head of housing operations, sorry, has asked for an extension regarding a review that was completed on service charges. Unfortunately, due to staff resources that of one particular individual, unfortunately, they've not been able to complete that. So therefore, he has requested an extension to enable that work to be completed satisfactorily. Any questions?
I know you mentioned the items where you've got 2 owners, if you like, Peter and Zach, but they appear twice. You've got the same items under Zach's.
Yes, yes, it's because both heads of service actually have a joint responsibility for them, but without one or the other. So rather than both asking for extensions, I felt it was more prudent to for Zach as the lead officer on that to requesting the extension.
Are there any comments from members?
Trying to understand is Annex 2. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Sorry, what is Annex 2 and how does that relate to Annex 1?
Annex 2 is a summary of those recommendations where heads of service are proposing to the audit committee for extensions to the target date, the regional agreed target dates.
Okay.
So, so Annex 1 gives all the actions that haven't been, that are due to be implemented by the end of this month. So therefore, you'll find ones that have actually got the 31st of March, they would not be asking for an extension because obviously they already have a few days in this respect, because usually it's audit committee is usually not quite as late as this in the calendar month. So the rest that are requiring extensions, then they are applied into Annex 2. So the head of service has to present a justification for an extension for the committee to actually agree whether that extension is justifiable or they agree.
Any other questions? Councillor Seaborn.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm fine with most of the material in here, but I have to say the stuff from head of planning, I'm into the realms of straws breaking camels' backs. We've got some of these items, we're now requesting a 5th extension. Some of them, if we grant that extension, will be well over 2 years overdue. I must admit, I will specifically ask not to be included in any vote to approve this. I would like to see the head of planning in front of us giving an explanation and an assurance that these items really are going to be finished by this deadline. Because you look at the wording on some of them, for instance, where are we? IA 21-01001, page 149, it actually says, I'd request an extension till December, whereupon the latest position can be reviewed in terms of third-party development works and costs. In other words, it's not a promised end to it at all. It's just on and on and on. And I think in terms of the audit committee taking this seriously, to me, it's come the time that we need someone in front of us explaining very clearly why this is continuously going on. So I don't find it acceptable. All the others I'm absolutely fine with. I think the explanations are clear. I'm quite happy to support the requested extensions, but this one, it's just dribbling on and on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Seaborn. That's Councillor Davidson.
I think Councillor Seaborn made exactly the same comment I was about to make. But on the other hand, I do welcome in Annex 2 the fact there's quite clear explanations as to why extensions are being asked. But I am disappointed to see that there are items which are marked as being high risk, red, I guess, still drifting on. I think, yes, we need to get a much clearer face-to-face explanation to why we are where we are.
Thank you. I have exactly the same comment to make. I'd like to extend that a bit further because, as you know from previous discussions, I've been very critical of the software development path that has been taken on in this area, specifically Horizon. I would like to be able to see any development documentation, version control documentation, testing documentation that should exist in a development like this. And as far as I know, there isn't any, nothing that you might say is written down in a formal sense. So I'd like to ask those questions and like to see something which at least addresses those aspects of these developments and the problems that has been found. So a lot of these comments in here talk about snagging. Well, there should not be any snagging if there's been a formal testing process undertaken before it's put into use. So can we take something like that, Graham? I'm not sure the best way. Getting Zach here is one thing, but I think I would like to see some formal documentation associated with all these problems.
So, well, Chairman, a couple of points. Yeah, completely understand the audit committee's feeling around this, and I mean, a lot of these recommendations were actually in relation, or some of them are in relation to the previous planning system, the ILAP system, and they've transferred across to. I mean, I'm looking here at references to ILAP, and so they predate the start of the implementation of Horizon. So they're not necessarily Horizon faults in themselves. They were raised as part of a review of the planning system, and at the time it was the old system. And so one of the reasons for the delay and the kind of reframing is because we now have a different system in place. I think absolutely you can ask Zach, and I'd suggest Sally Busby to join at your next meeting if you'd like to in June. Is that right? June. I mean, you know, they can come along and join and answer specific questions about this. On the documentation front, I can ask Sally what we've got, but clearly Sally only joined us a year ago, not at the beginning of the Horizon project, but certainly she will be aware of what we've got in place. But as I say, just I mean, I think there are two issues. Yeah, one is, I think if members are concerned around Horizon, that's one thing. Another thing is some of these are actually just were sort of generic observations made by the auditor based on the old system, and then they carry through. No, they shouldn't have carried through. They probably should have been fixed at the time. So I get that. And so if you'd like to do that at your next meeting, I can set that up.
Yeah, could we possibly bolt it onto the session that you're going to organise for us on the management framework? I don't know. I mean, I absolutely do not want to delay this, but I just don't want to see it again. One good, clear, honest conversation, put it to bed, and then get on.
Fine, Chairman. We'll do that. We'll add it on. Probably be late April, early May. I'm guessing for that session on the financial management code.
Is there at all a possibility of striking out some of these recommendations from internal audit which refer essentially to the old system, which are now being covered by the new processes and software provided through Horizon? In which case, can they just not be knocked off and removed from our scrutiny?
So I think, I mean, the reason that they've carried over is because they've been deemed to still be applicable and still be necessary to the new system, and they haven't been implemented on the new system yet. So certainly any that have either been deemed redundant or have been implemented would have fallen off. These ones, okay, they originated when we had the other system, but they still apply to the new one, so they've carried forward. So it's part of a reason for why they've taken longer than originally anticipated, but I completely get the fact that they've been back to you many times, keep getting batted on. So let's get it over and done with, have a specific focused discussion with the officers that should be able to help with your specific inquiries around them, and let's bolt it on when we're all in a room or a virtual room on the financial management code.
I think that would be very, very helpful. Councillor Seaborne, what is your position on this now in recommending these amendments and approving them? You prefer not to approve as it's written?
Yeah, I only the ones applying to the head of planning. All the others are absolutely fine. I think the justifications are reasonable and acceptable, and the requests are fine. So yes, I just want it recorded that I personally don't support. Well, I've said, you know, I support questioning the head of service before moving forward.
Yes, yes. Do other members agree with this? Sorry, Councillor Wilson.
Surely we could just, it won't stop it if we don't extend it, will it? So we actually have a bit of playroom, and we could actually put it down as to be reviewed at our next meeting, couldn't we?
Okay.
From Annex 2.
Is that okay?
Chairman, just to be absolutely clear, looking at Annex 2 on page 158, I think the block that is being referred to is the second block, headed up IA 2017-001, 2.1, 3.1, etc. It's that block there.
Yeah.
That says Head of Service Zach Elwood at the bottom of it. I didn't think the comments related to any of the other recommendations in this annex.
I think that's correct.
Is that fair enough?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Just to help Kimberly to record it accurately, and me to pass it on accurately. Thank you.
Okay. Then in that case, we have a recommendation. So we need to reword this a bit. It is recommended that the committee considers the information contained and following discussion identifies any action it wishes to be taken. Okay, so we have identified the action to review that that particular section. But we're happy with the remaining items in Annex 2.
Second block, yeah.
Yeah. So the items in the second block will be reviewed at that meeting with the head of service.
The second block will be approved, and then the first block. And
This is the yeah.
I'm confusing you. I better stop.
Gail, perhaps I'll leave it to you to.
Yes, I
find
would
the right
probably
words.
say with the exception of the item in Appendix 2,
Yeah.
second section with
section.
IA 20, whatever. All the rest are agreed
Yes.
in Annex 2 with the exception of, and then the wording that I think Councillor, sorry. Yeah,
Yes.
those are to be reviewed at the next informal meeting of the Audit Committee on the topic.
On that topic.
So words to that effect, we can talk about that, Kimberly.
Okay, thank you very much. That covers that then. Item 15, the next one again, Gail, reviewing the progress and achieving the audit plan. Page 161 to 184.
Before I move to that one, if I can just, now, Audit Committee members may already received it, but our contractor, Southern Internal Audit Partnership, they do an annual survey of us as users of their service. So can I just ask you to, please, can you ensure that you do feedback to them, because it is a valuable piece of information that comes back to me as well as to the perception you have as to the work that they're doing, and obviously the work that we do as audit. So that'd be good, thank you. So yes, this one is progress of the internal audit plan for 2020-21. And as you can see in the annex, that the reviews, all reviews that we're going to be doing have started this year. And as I say, they are making very good progress. Got 65% of the audit plan is complete, got 35% still in progress. The majority of those, the majority of the field work has been done. It's mainly the reporting, signing off, and it going through their process, their assurance process, to make sure that the reports have gone through their scrutiny and gone through their governance process. As you can see, there's quite a few there with ticks. And again, there's been a few reviews which you will see that I have completed, which are obviously down as advisory reviews. And therefore, on paragraph 8, you will see those reviews that, on the second part of paragraph 8, you'll see those reviews that I have completed that have been added into the plan. And due to that, there was a few three reviews that were going to be proposed to be deferred to the next audit plan year. And one of those was due to the, unfortunately, I mentioned before, the housing service, a member of staff not being available, and that same member of staff would have been the key contact for the void properties review. So therefore, we've had to put that into next year. And those other two reviews were originally highlighted to be possibly been done by myself, but due to my workload, that wasn't possible. And then we have in paragraph 10, was budget to date, and obviously any savings at the end of the year goes back into the savings pot. So that was obviously good news for Peter and the team. And any questions?
Councillor Dixon.
Not entirely sure this is on topic, but anyway, the loan working policy, is that being sponsored by, who's HOERS?
Sorry, that's the head of Environment and Regulatory Services.
Okay. I'm just surprised, just a comment, I don't know, I hadn't really come across this one before. I'm surprised it's called the loan working policy, because it does have certain negative connotations. And I know at my workplace, we call it the working from anywhere policy, or we'll talk about remote working, but we don't talk about loan working. And the fact of the matter is that people have now got the choice to come into the office. So nobody should feel like they're lone working, and surely that's a management issue as opposed to a physical issue.
The loan working policy relates to members of our staff who actually go out into the borough working on their own, and therefore we have a strict policy where they have to make sure they inform their manager or one of their subordinates or one of the members of staff where they are. But we also have they also have a security app where they have to sign in and sign out of, which actually the notification goes to the manager to tell them that they're safe. So this review was looking at how that was being applied, whether it's been applied consistently, and whether there was any areas of concern. So it's a way of protecting our staff rather than actually, yeah. No, it's okay, no problem. If they've actually triggered the alarm, the app, because before they go into any premises that they may feel that they're at risk, they have to actually press the app to say they're going into the premises. If they haven't actually pressed it within a certain period of time after coming out, there is a centre, an IT centre, that actually then triggers an alarm to the next person that's nominated to them, which is usually the manager, to actually, and they actually, what happens is, I think the IT centre actually phones the person to make sure they're okay. If they don't get a response to that, then it goes to the manager to tell them that, and of course, and that's when the escalation actually happens. And again, in some cases, it can be the police actually turning up to that address to make sure that a member of staff is fine. Phone itself. Personally, I don't use it, so the functionality of it, I'm not used to the functionality, but I know my fraud investigation officer, he uses it all the time, because I then get the reports as to when he's actually correctly logged in and triggered the fact he's now safe again. So there are reports that are produced, but I've never actually had an incident, thank God, that the note's actually been escalated. Okay.
Right.
Chairman, just give a couple of examples. Actually, this could be building control officers, it could be our tenant visiting officers, it could be planning enforcement officers, any of our enforcement officers actually. So a whole range of people are sometimes on their own. That will be risk assessed. If they go into a household where we know that there could be an issue, then we would always try and double up. But so this is when we're not expecting anything, but it's just about our duty of care to our staff to protect the staff. So just to give some examples, Chairman.
Thank you, Graham. Yeah, one minor comment on page 171, where you talk about the boiler replacement item. You've got total actions 5, not yet due 5, complete 1. So they should add up, shouldn't it?
Sorry, that should be a 4 in that one, not yet due.
And then just a general question, really. In page 177, I think this is to do with, is it the recycling bins? rubbish bins. And then you've got a comment here about reconciliation of stock issues and income received to ensure no undue stock shrinkage. Where does that come in? Am I right? It is to do with the collection of the bins, isn't it? This item.
This is actually to do with the actual the bins, the receptacle that the
Yes.
rubbish is put into.
Yes.
Is where they're actually held in storage for us out at the depot. So that is relating to that.
So, that's
So
what I mean,
basically,
yeah.
undue stock shrinkage is obviously referring to make sure they can all be accounted for.
Yeah, yeah. Where would they go otherwise? I mean, if what you're doing is you're providing a number of bins in the depot, and you pay for those from the supplier, and then they're sent out to residents, and they pay. Well, they don't pay for the blue or the grey bins. They pay for the garden waste bins.
Yes, there's
So you
certain
would-
bins they pay for, and certain, but if it's a replacement bin, they can in actual fact be asked to pay for it, and they've already had one. But this undue shrinkage is obviously, as they're being held on our behalf by a third party, we want to make sure that they're all accounted for. That basically there is none that actually go out the depot without the proper paperwork in the process.
Just basically a stock audit.
Sorry?
It's basically a stock audit.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah,
Okay,
there are
thank you.
stock control records.
Yeah. Thank you. I have no more questions. No. Excellent. That means that item we can complete its doing this one, make sure I've got the right pages. Yes, the recommendation that we note the contents of the internal audit progress report as attached. Noted. Agreed. Item 16, proposed internal audit plan. Again, Gail to report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, this is the proposed plan for 2022-23. And detailed on the plan is the outcome of my risk assessment, consultation with heads of service and management board. And it's presented to the audit committee, hopefully for approval. And as you can see, I've also included those reviews, those 3 reviews that were proposed to be deferred from this year into next year. And as you can see, there are a few areas relating to housing. The head of housing is obviously very keen to ensure that the processes within his area are working as the way he would wish them to be working. And just point out regarding comments we had earlier on regarding risk management, there is a audit review of risk management proposed in next year's plan. And if members have any comments?
Any questions? Councillor Siebel.
Thank you, Chairman. Knowing the logic that's gone into putting this together, I'm sure everything that's on it's absolutely spot on. Just things that I wondered about that might be worthy of some investigation. The last 2 years, we've been doing an awful lot of homeworking. It's a major change. Has there been any audit investigation to see how effective it has been and what learnings there are to come out of that? Because we discussed that earlier in the risk context, and I think having something formally that can be fed into development in that area could be really useful. So I'd toss that into the room as something that might be of use. And the other thing is that a sense that planning is probably about our most stressed area at the moment, but there's no aspect of planning that seems to be covered by the proposed plan. And I can't suggest any. I don't know what to look at, but it just seems strange that a service area that's having real trouble recruiting staff has gone through major changes in organisation and systems is not covered. But well, so an observation to 2 areas that are probably right up there that don't seem to be covered by it. Over to you. Thoughts?
Well, with regarding the planning aspect, there was a lot of consideration taken into that, because on this year's current plan, taking on board the point you made regarding staffing issues and their workflow, we've had 2 reviews completed in that area this year. One of those was looking at the post-implementation review of Horizon, and the other one was planning housing delivery. So therefore, trying to make sure we're not having a total spending all our resources in that area, I felt it was more prudent to actually give them time, to get Horizon implemented and getting all the additional items added into that, but also the housing delivery review. It was quite a few days. It was actually larger than what I usually provide to the contractor to do. And I felt that it was give them time to get over that before we then start to look at reviews in that area. So that was the logic behind that one. Regarding the home working, I am aware that with the home working, obviously HR have been doing constantly doing reviews as to how home working is having an impact. And again, I didn't feel it was prudent for internal audit to get too involved in that at this stage until they've actually completed the review and assessing what effect it's having. But what I will do is the home working one, I'll actually have a rethink regarding discussing with HR lead as to see whether there's anything they think that internal audit could add to the work that they're doing.
Thank you, Gail. The document on Horizon, is that something we should be be aware of its content before we have our informal meeting on the coding of the software issues? And if so, are there other documents of a similar nature? I mean, I don't know how far that document goes, or whether there are other associated documents with the other software packages.
Well, the focus of the review was more on the post-implementation of Horizon and as to how it's actually meeting the objectives of the planning system. It wasn't actually looking more at the contractual elements as to the development of the system. It was more focusing on, is the system doing what planning needed to do to actually achieve the objectives that the previous planning system was actually achieving, moving across this. So it wasn't, my understanding, and I know it wasn't actually focusing on the development, was a parallel testing done, etc., etc. It was actually mainly focusing on, is the system doing what we need it to do? So I know the review is still ongoing, because that's one of the ones that quite a lot of work has been done on it, but it hasn't yet been fully completed. So that one is still in progress.
How long will that take, do you think, to get to completion?
I don't know, because as I say, it's not one I've done myself. It's one that the contractor's doing, because obviously they've got such a breadth of knowledge and experience in these things. So I wouldn't like to put a date on that, but I do know that there has been quite a lot of work done on that.
Because it seems to me that would be a good starting point, because a lot of the issues we're having problems with is the, if you like, the other issue, the other aspects that fold into that system. You know, so it may well be the core focus of Horizon is actually doing that job that was intended to do, but it's how then we expand on to the other capabilities, let's say. Yeah,
because I think the thing is that obviously Graham was indicating the observations that were made in the previous ILAP system. That's where obviously these observations and the target dates haven't yet been achieved. Those haven't obviously yet been inbuilt into the added on, bolted on, whatever terminology the software suppliers are using. No, those haven't yet been added into the Horizon system.
Okay, thank you.
But regarding timeframes as to when the contractor is going to be finished that review,
is that something you might find out, see what timescales they're working to?
Yeah, again, sometimes it depends on our response and us going back to them as well. No, it depends how quickly we're responding to the information they're requiring and when they can get a meeting together that everyone is available. That's the other thing, is to get the availability of people at one time. At the moment, that's quite problematic with the end of financial year, etc. But I'll have a look and see if they can give me an indication when they're proposing to have it
Okay.
completed by.
Thank
Okay,
you.
no problem.
No other comments for Gail on this item? In that case, we can say that's finished, and there's a recommendation that we comment and approve the proposed draft internal audit plan for 2022-23 as attached Annex 1, which we've done. So that's agreed? Yep, thank you. Final item, I believe the recurrent annual work programme, again from Gail.
Yeah, don't blame Gail for that, Chairman. I must have got cut and paste happy putting Gail on for that because it's not hers.
Right.
It's me. Sorry, Chairman. Yeah, I think I must have got a bit happy with my cut and paste there. Yeah, it's just for the committee to note the annual work programme and just to accept that we're going to be adding the additional item to the June meeting to review annually.
The work programme is noted. Agreed. Thank you very much. Well, that completes the agenda. Declare this meeting now closed. Thank you all very much for attending.